As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Now, also in our channel, we try to talk about for individual homeowners and families and small communities where they can make a start on a very small scale. Could you give us one or two examples of something that you think people can do on a household scale or on a neighborhood scale, something if they want to make a start in away from what ain't normal and to something that starts to reclaim some historical normalcy and some self-reliance along the way?
Sure. Well, anybody who knows me at all knows that I'm a big, big lover of domestic poultry, chickens. And so when you consider the billions of dollars that Americans, for example, spend on cat food and dog food, and don't misread. I'm not saying, I hate dogs and cats. We've got both. But what I am suggesting is that that it's actually more important than having a cat or a dog to have a couple of chickens who can eat your kitchen scraps, turn them into eggs, and now you have both. You've eliminated your waste stream from the curb and the landfill and the trash, the whole deal, and you now have these wonderfully nutritious eggs to eat for your own family. This can be done indoors. You don't have to have outdoor access to be able to do this. And so, there is a very simple thing. In fact, if 1 in 3 households had enough chickens, and it would only take 3 or 4 to eat all their kitchen scraps, there would be enough eggs produced in this country to not have one single factory egg farm. In other words, the food system would be embedded, it would be integrated in the community. Right now we have a segregated food system. The food systems that throughout history that have always been normal, that have worked, have been food systems where the bulk of the food is produced proximate to where people live. That's actually the most secure and the most accountable system. And so that's one thing. Another one, of course, is to shut off the TV and shut off the video game and take your recreation time and money and go find your farmer. Go find somebody to have a relationship with. When you actually know where your food is coming from, it's not just this, Michelle Obama, know your farmer, know your food, and all the conservatives go, it's all ishy-wishy and sounds sentimental and all that. But there's a lot of truth in that, because here's the deal. When you know where your food's coming from, it becomes far more secure. If things go south, if your farmer, for example, is not using a bunch of chemical fertilizers and is doing composting and carbon recycling on site and is actually substituting labor and management for pharmaceuticals and inputs, that whole food production system is far more secure in economic, energy, or cultural collapse. And so knowing that farmer, you're going to have a relationship. And if we go into an unsettled period, you're going to have a lot better chance of maintaining your food supply knowing the producer than you are just assuming that nobody's going to go in and clean out the supermarket shelves. I mean, look at what happens when a blizzard is predicted. I mean, within hours of a blizzard prediction, half the food's gone from a supermarket. The average supermarket only carries 3 days' supply of food. That's it. 3 days supply of food.
And that's for 3 days of normal activity. But you're right, in those exceptional situations, it can be just hours. We have another recording on this channel called Making of a Reluctant Prepper. And there are photos in there that I took in a local grocery store because a winter storm was coming. We went in there was an armed police officer standing guard at the door, and numbers of the shelves were picked clean, and that was within hours of the forecast saying that a big major winter storm was coming.
Yeah. So just imagine if there were a true, cultural calamity, whether it's crime or energy or economic or whatever, and imagine those shelves not being restocked in a couple of days. That's the serious thing, and so the whole idea here is let's look at what has stood the test of time, how people have lived in the past. Guess what? They've lived with food in the house. They've had a larder. They've had a pantry. They have people in the past always had storehouses of food because they didn't know. There wasn't a supermarket, and so they were preparing for hard times always. So people stockpiled food. They stockpiled energy in the form of firewood. That was the historical normalcy. And of course, I'm a big believer in firewood. In fact, I think we need to be cutting way more trees in this country than we are right now. That's why we're having so many forest fires, is because we're not working in our forests enough. We're not if all the trees that were burning in these huge wildfires, if they were actually cut by high-tech chainsaws before they went dead and burned up, there would be a tremendous amount of energy there. Austria, my understanding is that 80% of their domestic heat now comes from wood pellets. So instead of having the number 2 fuel oil truck or the propane truck drive down the street, you have this, what looks like a grain truck, go down the street, and it just stops. You've got this flexible auger, and the guy pulls it out, sticks it in your little basement door there that goes in your little wood pellet hopper, and augers in your ton or two, whatever, of wood pellets. And this is all done. The trees are grown locally. The pelletizing is done locally. The stoves are done locally. And so suddenly you can actually there is true human scale perception and accountability in the system. You can go down and see the guys making your pellets or cutting your firewood or whatever you're going to do, and this is the way people have lived throughout history, and I think that assuming that we can just extricate ourselves and levitate into some Star Trek nirvana with some sort of cosmic convergence where we aren't dependent on any of these patterns is incredibly foolish and is the height of arrogance that we will escape every calamity or disruption that has inevitably come to every single civilization throughout history.
As though the forces of nature don't apply to us anymore, as though we've moved beyond that or something.
That's right.
On a humorous note, back on your topic of domestic chickens, my daughter and her family in a southwestern metro area were raising both chickens and quail for eggs, and her daughter had a chore at a young age of going and gathering the eggs in the morning. When she got to school, the teachers are trained to watch out for signs of neglect or children who are falling through the cracks, no child left behind, all that sort of thing. And one asked, "What did you have for breakfast this morning?" I guess it's a routine question they're supposed to ask or something. And she said, "Well, I had quail eggs." And the lady, her teacher, got a little more curious and said, "How did you get those?" "Well, I go out. My mother sends me out in the morning to gather the quail eggs, my granddaughter said. And the teacher had a talk with my daughter when she went to pick up my granddaughter after school. Said, you really should provide breakfast for your children. It isn't really probably the best thing for them to be out foraging for wild things, just if the school can provide food, if you can't afford it, that kind of shit. What? I feed my children. What are you talking about? Then the story came out that there was a leaping to the assumption that if you're gathering quail eggs in the morning, you must be a homeless person or something.
Yeah.
So that you can be prepared to face some quizzical or embarrassing, or you're not quite fitting in with the flow looks or attitudes or questions. So you've certainly had practice preparing, yourself and others to know how to deal with that patiently and with a bit of humor, but with some resolve as well. If you can give people just some moral support here and let them know how they can, have that self-assurance that don't be inhibited by I'm not going to be going with the flow if I do this sort of thing.
Yeah, well, actually, quail eggs are far more expensive, and I mean that's a luxury item. Of course, the teacher thought she was out foraging. I understand they just wouldn't think domestic quail, but yeah, there is a lot of condescension in our culture that if you are a prepper, if you actually do things yourself for yourself, and live debt-free with a big pantry and a lot of self-sufficiency in your life, in your home, that somehow that is not sophisticated. That's what underachievers or socially disadvantaged or intellectually disadvantaged, brown people do that kind of thing. And we've got this kind of stereotype, and that's why I've developed this thing where I just say right up front, you can tell a lot about whether you're actually helping or hurting your ecological nest by how many leftovers you eat. I mean, it's funny, but it stimulates conversation. And that's what we've got to do. Is we've got to pique people's interest in conversations. This includes alternative medicine. I mean, I go to a quack. We've done acupuncture, all these these kind of weird stuff. But we don't take any drugs, no pharmaceuticals. I take vitamin C, and I can look at anybody in the face and say, I have not had a cold. I can't even remember when I had a cold last. I mean, it's years and years that I've gone without one single cold. How long have you gone without one? And what we try to do is, instead of preaching at people, we try to pique their interest with something that is kind of a ubiquitous problem that people are dealing with in our culture, and say, hey, we enjoy this, or we don't have that problem, or we have found this alternative that is very self-satisfying. Homeschooling. There's another where you're not dependent on somebody else for your education. You're actually learning what you want to learn. The ultimate.
Well, home birth, for that matter, as well. We were shocked when we've had 5 children, the last 2 of which we had at home by choice. And in the research that we did before that, we went in with the assumption that you're safer. You always have safest for your baby. You want to do whatever is the safest for the mom and safest for the baby. We always assumed, because of the way we were brought up in the 60s and so on, to think that must be in a hospital. And what instead we found is that in the spirit of folks, this ain't normal, is instead of a historical like 4% cesarean rate, we're upper 30% in this country. And instead of costing less than $1,000 that it cost us to have home births with experienced helpers at our sides, it's upwards $25,000 to $30,000 people are paying, or the insurance is paying. We're paying for that, of course,
yep.
For hospital births. And that after all, you're exposing yourself to a host of interventions that have side effects and consequences and escalating patterns of getting into deeper and deeper interventions by putting yourself in a place that, oh, by the way, is also full of all kinds of infectious diseases and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and absolutely, I appreciate that. However, I am really glad that when there's a complicated birth, there is a hospital to go to, and there are exceptional surgeons and
that's right.
And pharmaceuticals. I'm not opposed to pharmaceuticals in their proper course, but when they when the average American is on 3 prescriptions, there's something wrong. That ain't normal. It's not normal for a culture to be that dependent on something like that. And there are all sorts of alternative things, herbs and I mean the whole science of herbology. Goodness, talk about self-sufficiency. You can create your own, pharmacy in your home just with herbs and some knowledge on how to use them. There's a tremendous amount of things. I mean, I have allergies to pollen in the spring. Yeah, I'm a grass farmer and get grass allergies, and herbologist told Teresa and I about burdock root. And so in the spring, if I start getting some sniffles or watery eyes, I just go out with a shovel and dig up a burdock root. Teresa steeps it, makes a dense tea out of it. I take a half a cup, breakfast, lunch, supper, and then the next breakfast. It's 4 treatments, half a cup, and literally, it's just gone. And a lot of these things are, man, they're powerful. They pack a punch. They're not, and they don't have the side effects that all these hard pharmaceuticals do. So, yeah, one of the best things you can do to be self-reliant is watch your health. Eat well and exercise well, and get rid of the soft drinks, and drop to a cup of coffee a day, and certainly get rid of the cigarettes. All the risky stuff that we know. Quit eating white bread, and actually look at all of the high risk things that aren't normal. Yeah, there's no reason for Velveeta cheese to be in your refrigerator. Cheese squirting out of a tube that doesn't get moldy on the table for a year. That ain't normal. If it won't get moldy on the table, it won't decompose in your gut. So anything that you eat should be something that will decompose. And those are just really, really simple tests, looking at historical normalcy and patterns to where you can choose today. Well, is this good for me or is this not? I mean, ultra pasteurized milk that is shelf stable at ambient temperature for 6 months. How can there be any nutrition? How can there be anything living in there for you in something as naturally fragile as milk that's actually shelf-stable at ambient temperature for 6 months? Folks, this ain't normal.
We had a good friend that taught us how to make our own, grind our own wheat and make our own flour and make our own bread at home, and we would do that routinely and make large batches and that sort of thing. He mentioned that some of the most nutritious parts of the wheat that are released when the kernel is ground up are released as volatile oils and wheat germ oil and that sort of thing, and that really, without preservation, if it's not baked into bread, it really doesn't have its wholesomeness after like 3 days, and so you really do want to use that while it's fresh. And he said that we get done a number on us when we listen to the language that's used to describe the modern replacements for some of these truly healthy things, like enriched flour. He said, so of all the nutrients that have been taken out of that flour and they put back in 12 vitamins, he said, if you were walking down an alley and you had a big pocket full of money and somebody beat you up, knocked you down, stole all your money and gave you back $12, would you feel enriched?
Right. Or better yet, gave you back some counterfeit bills.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The life is in the germ, and that's why historically, people ground flour daily or every other day Why? Because it would go rancid. Because it was a decomposable stuff. I was out in California. One of the most interesting little object lessons I ever saw was I was out in California at a farm school. This was a farm attached to a couple of middle schools, and they'd incorporated the farm into the science curriculum and the math curriculum and different things. And the kids would go out to the farm, every other week and do things, and then they'd learn how to measure and build and look at a microscope. It was all part of this. Okay, so the two farm gals that ran the farm, the two women, they gave an assignment to the kids. They said, now next time you bring some food, and the kids had learned all about earthworms, and there was this big, about the size of a coffin. It was a big coffin. It was about 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep and 8 feet long, this big box that was a worm bed. Of course, the kids had learned all about worms and enjoyed looking at they're fascinating to see them in there crawling around and all this stuff. So anyway, so the kids brought food the next time they came, and of course they brought Twizzlers and Snickers bars and Cheerios and Wonder Bread and that sort of thing, and buried it all in the worm box. And the farmer gal brought an orange, and some ground beef and fresh baked whole wheat bread, and buried that on the other end of the worm bed. 2 weeks later, the kids come back. Of course, they're all primed for this. They go charging up to the box. They open it up, and they go into their side, and they bring out the Twizzlers and the Cheerios and the Snickers bar and the Wonder Bread. They go into the other side and they start pawing through, and they can't find anything. And the obvious question then that the teachers, the thought for the day was, well, why would you want to eat something worms won't even eat? And it really brought it home. And I think that's a pretty good test.
Well, Joel, we really appreciate you joining us here on Reluctant Preppers to talk about Folks This Ain't Normal, because it just really validates people's gut realization and their awareness that it's not they who are out of step, it's the culture, the modern world that has become basically out of step with reality and without the lessons of history. And wonder if we could have you back to talk one time about don't be scared, be strange. You say that it's talking about what is holding you back. What do you fear? Why can't you turn your homestead into a full-time business? 7 fears followed by 7 solutions are the framework for that talk. And we'd love to have you back another time if you'd come back and talk with us about that.
I would be more than honored. Thank you.
We'd love to keep lowering the barricades for people to just really get them the confidence, the reassurance that they need to really start making those first steps.
That's exactly right. Well said. Thank you very much, and we'll do it again.
Perfect. Thanks, Joel. Take care.